what is interesting to me is that this is a continual struggle, and the issues where corruption breaks out tend to shift. The nature of the problem tends to shift over time. In Queensland, where I was a public servant and where we are now, issues about the integrity of the police force were the big issue in the 1980s. And we spent a very long time dealing with those sorts of issues. There were also issues about democratic liberties and a bunch of other things about the independence of the audit and integrity bodies as well. But through 10 years of hard work, Queensland did change and became, in Australian terms, a leader rather than a laggard, as I've said here. But by 10 years on, there was a quick review of what was happening in Queensland, and it found that we were starting to slip backwards. There had been good progress, but what was found was, and I'll just take a moment on this because I think it's actually a generic story, that on the one hand, everyone who was being interviewed for how was things going in Queensland was saying we have reform fatigue. This is a serious problem with restructuring and with reforms in almost every field, not just integrity and accountability. People wanted to move on to other issues. They were sick of this. We go endlessly on and on about this. There were issues about properly financing and resourcing and skilling and training. And this is, again, an endemic thing that needs to be properly recognised and needs to be attended to every year. Yeah, a couple of years ago, there was a lot of media coverage about corruption in Queensland. It was not so much anymore about the police, it was more about the role of private lobbyists and political donations and the need for stricter codes of conduct for politicians and their advisors. So, as I say, the problems shift, the struggle continues. Here's my last slide. From my own experience as Public Service Commissioner in Queensland and from my own research around pro-integrity reform, I think that one way of thinking about it is to say you need all four of these things to be happening well in an institutional context. Starting in the bottom right-hand corner, investigations and reports. If we don't have a capacity to find out what is going on and to pursue people who seem to be doing the wrong thing, then the system is not really working at all. Going anti-clockwise, control systems. This is a shorthand way of saying we need good systems for preventing fraud and embezzlement, for good auditing, for double checking of what's going on, making sure that the rules are being applied, and so forth. Leadership is often the missing ingredient. This is about where the leaders at the political level or at the bureaucratic level or in civil society, they model and champion good behaviour. If we have good systems in place but the leaders are well known to be doing something different, they are playing a different game, then this undermines all the good things we're doing in terms of processes and policies. And then education and training, the last one, absolutely necessary, but needs to be refreshed and reinvigorated all the time so that people don't get stale and fed up, and that they come to grips with the new challenges and training the next generation and so on. So thanks, Adele, I think it was terrific, and let's, Mary, get into some discussion in the short time we have left.
You want to show the DVD now, or you want to open up a discussion? It's up to you.
I think we need to discuss now.
Yeah. Question?
I'll stand there.
Yeah, thank you very much for the lecture. I think the comment I want to make has to do with the experience in my own country, Nigeria. And I see that the issue of governance and putting adequate measures and control in place, I don't think that is the problem we experience in Nigeria, because if you go through the models and all there are a lot of control system put in place to check corruption in public service, for instance. But what I have discovered is they don't work, because there seems to be a conspiracy, a grand conspiracy against the system. Left to itself, the control measures are quite beautiful in order, but those who are supposed to be the police of the system are part of the problem, because they connive with those, the leadership and everything. And so when there is that conspiracy, then nothing seems to work. I'll cite a personal example, for instance. I was given an assignment as a secretary and member of a committee to investigate a particular incident. The discovery we made after turning in my report, the chairman of the committee called me and said, "Look, Tunde, don't be a hero. And that if you do this, you are going to set many tongues wagging, heads may roll, and you may even lose your life." The chairman, being a woman, now told me that, look, there was a time a son of hers was into government auditing, and having audited a particular big contract scam, was the day the report was presented, was killed in his office, and nothing came out of it. And so because of all that, there seems to be this grand conspiracy that, look, just keep quiet, you can't change the system, let them do whatever they want to do. And right now, we don't know the way forward. That's the comment I want to make, and I think it's a lot more to do with the ethical issue than the problem of putting political institutions in place.
You want me to give a solution to it? Or?
I would love that.
Well, I mean, good news about Nigeria is that, again, according to the Transparency International assessment, that if you compare Nigeria's corruption today with 10 years back, it has improved a little bit than what used to be the case before. And this is probably mainly owing to the finance minister, the vice president you had, who used to be in the World Bank, and she came back and she tried to put in place a lot of checks and control and balance instruments into the system. But however, as I said before, that the issue of civil liberties, the rule of law, is absolutely key to it. But the problem is when you have a country that has gone so far ahead in terms of entrenching the corruption, the whole institution, the whole society has become part of it. It is almost like what Mr. Kautilya in 4th century BC said, you don't even know what is corruption, what is not corruption. And then when you have a society where your mentors become your tormentors, it's very, very difficult to change anything. The only other way that possibly change will come, and only Allah can do that, is that if you have a leadership, a political group, which comes with a clear mandate and with very serious citizen backing to implement corruption-related reforms. The other change that may come or could come is from the donor community, from your Western allies. But Western allies has a vested interest in maintaining corruption in Nigeria, because their corporations gain from the Nigerian oil. And Nigeria's biggest curse to me, unlike many other oil-producing countries of Africa, is this windfall gain that came from oil before the institutions could be put in place. So once those institutions were not there and the oil came, and oil came within the nexus of institutions that were already corrupt, unresponding, unaccountable, and they only simply got entrenched and strengthened. Now it is neither in the interest of the existing establishment, nor in the interest of the Western donor community or even the corporations to change things, because this is how they benefit most. If they can manipulate, keep happy few people, then they can extract more benefit out of the Nigeria's resources. You see, the reason I bring in the international equation, it has both the beneficial side of it it was also the negative side of it. For example, in the 60s when Mr. Mossadegh in Iran was duly elected as the Prime Minister of Iran, and he wanted to nationalize Iranian oil so that Iranians can have control on their own oil. What happened then? It was followed by a coup. He was disposed, and for about 30, 40 years you have Shah of Iran, one of the most corrupt, repressive government you can ever think of. So it is difficult. It is difficult, but at the same time, as I said, that in a situation like that, the only way change can come if it comes from within. It's very, very difficult to bring it from outside. And it's not in the interest of any of the political parties or the government to make those changes. And there are real life risks, as you said. So maybe what you can do in an environment like that, you do whatever you can do. And sort of change things incrementally. You cannot change things overnight. It's impossible. Bangladesh had about 2 years of what they call a caretaker government. It was a military-backed civil government, unelected government, but they used that 2 years to bring in a lot of instruments of control, the jail, a lot of corrupt businessmen, politicians, etc. After 2 years, an election had happened, back to square one. So, issue is, I mean, in corruption control, who do you target? Do you target the corrupt or the corruption? You target both. Unless you have system to punish the corrupt and then rectify the systemic issues that contribute to corruption, it will be very difficult. And I totally accept that in Nigeria it's a very different situation. Even civil societies, to take up stand position, and people within the government like yourself, we wanted to take some position, we will not be allowed to do that. It will be marginalized. So all we can say, do as much as you can, but ultimately the answer lies to the citizens in general. They have to mobilize themselves. They have to act. Change must come from within. Not a very optimistic answer, but that's all.
Thank you.
You talk about countries that are free or not free and partly free. So it made me the impression that is legislation therefore a key issue in alleviating corruption?
Sorry?
Is legislation like having a law in place in this country?
I think every country has enough law about corruption. What you don't have is the implementation of those laws, truthful implementation of those laws. So that is why the idea of rule of law, independent judiciary, and the idea of protecting people who speak out and say things about corruption and then bring out the issues, those are the real issues. So if your mentors become your tormentors, then none of any of these laws will ever work. So the law is never a problem. Every country has got sufficient laws to control corruption. What you don't have is a truthful implementation. And that's what you need to do.
Thank you so much for the good presentations. From the presentation that you gave us, it gave me the impression that the Chinese are actually the most corrupt people. I don't know if it's a correct assumption from the data that you gave us. So now, for me, I come from a developing country, and in my country, which is Malawi, the Chinese are actually coming in so much right now to help us in terms of the programs that we have. And they're actually more attractive in terms of when they come, they don't demand anything, no interest, nothing. So it's actually, our country is actually using them more than the World Bank and the IMF. So I have a concern, or maybe it's a question, that for such countries, the developing countries, do you think there's now hope? Because you also mentioned that if there's a platform for corruption, people will likely be corrupt. And if they're coming in with such policies, it's unlikely that our governments will say no to them. So do you think there's hope for developing countries, especially like African countries, in terms of overcoming corruption?
There's always hope, even in the worst situation. Well, let me clarify the Chinese situation. And I'm glad that I'm out of UN now, so I can speak more openly.